Betrayal of trust. Her nails raked across my back, her breath hot against my neck as she moaned my name. Sarah's body arched beneath me, her fingers gripping my shoulders like she never wanted to let go. I thrust deeper, our bodies slick with sweat, lost in the heat of something we both knew was wrong but couldn't resist. "Harder, Alex," she gasped, her voice raw with desire. I obeyed. The bed creaked beneath us, the room filled with the sound of skin meeting skin. My lips found her collarbone, then her breasts, tracing a path of sinful worship. Sarah's back arched, her nails dragging down my chest, her head thrown back in pleasure. I should have felt guilty. I should have stopped. But I didn't. Because in that moment, wrapped in her warmth, drowning in her scent, I wasn't a husband betraying his wife. I was just a man lost in pleasure, craving more, needing more. Then came the knock on the door. A sharp, urgent knock that sent ice through my veins. "Alex," a voice called from the hallway. My wife's voice. "Maddie." My heart stopped. Sarah's eyes widened in panic. And just like that, the world I had built on lies and desire threatened to come crashing down. Before we dive in, if you're already hooked, you're going to love this story. It's about secrets, temptation, and how one mistake can ruin everything. If you enjoy gripping, raw, and erotic stories filled with suspense, make sure to like this story, subscribe, and drop a comment about what you think is going to happen next. Now, let me take you deep into the story and tell you how it all started, how it all began. I never meant to cheat. Let's get that out of the way first. I wasn't some asshole who married a woman just to betray her. I loved Maddie. I really did. She was my best friend, my partner, the mother of my children. But love and desire are two very different things. And sometimes, when you stop paying attention, desire sneaks up on you and wraps around your throat before you even realize you're suffocating. Maddie and I had been together for over a decade. We had 2 kids, a mortgage, and the kind of marriage that looked perfect from the outside. But inside, things had started to crack. It wasn't one big thing. It was a million little things. The way she sighed when I came home late from work. The way she barely kissed me anymore. The way sex had become predictable, scheduled, mechanical, something we did because we had to, not because we wanted to. I told myself it was normal, that all marriages went through this, that things would get better. And then Sarah happened. Sarah was Maddie's best friend, a little younger, a little wilder, the kind of woman who turned heads when she walked into a room. She had this effortless charm, this flirtatious energy that made everyone feel like they were the most important person in the world when she spoke to them. And I wasn't immune. At first, it was harmless, a lingering glance, a joke that lasted a little too long. The way her hand would rest on my arm when she laughed. And then came the night that changed everything. Maddie had thrown a party at our house, just a small get-together with friends, drinks, and music. I had a few beers. Sarah had more than a few. We ended up alone in the kitchen. I don't even remember how it started. Maybe it was the way she leaned in just a little too close, or the way her lips brushed my ear when she whispered a joke. Maybe it was the way my body reacted before my brain could stop it. 1 second, we were talking. The next, my mouth was on hers, my hands tangled in her hair, and I was pressing her against the counter like I had been starving for her. We broke apart when we heard footsteps. It was Maddie. Sarah wiped her lips, gave me a look that I couldn't quite read, and walked away like nothing had happened. I stood there, heart pounding, tasting her on my lips. That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. It was only the beginning. The next morning, I woke up with a hangover and a head full of guilt. I told myself it was a mistake, a drunken moment that meant nothing. And then my phone buzzed. "Sarah, we need to talk." I stared at the screen, my stomach twisting. I could ignore it, pretend like it never happened. But I didn't. Instead, I texted back. Where? We met at a coffee shop across town, neutral ground. She looked different in the daylight, less wild, more serious. We need to forget about last night, she said, stirring her coffee. It was a mistake. I nodded. Yeah, a mistake. A pause. But you liked it, didn't you? She asked, her voice softer now. I exhaled, rubbing my jaw. Sarah, she leaned in. Because I did. I should have walked away, but I didn't. And that's how it all started. What I didn't know was that this wasn't just about me and Sarah. There was someone else waiting in the shadows, someone I never expected. And by the time I realized how deep I was in, there was no way out. I sat in my car outside the coffee shop, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping me tethered to reality. My heart was still racing. Sarah's words echoed in my head. Because I did. She had liked it, just like I had. And now there was no denying the pull between us, the way something had shifted the moment our lips met. I should have walked away. But we both knew I wouldn't. When I got home that evening, Maddie was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner. She didn't even look up when I walked in. You're late, she said flatly. I swallowed. Yeah, got caught up at work. She nodded, but there was no warmth in her expression. No curiosity, no suspicion, just the usual tiredness that had become part of our routine. I walked up behind her and slid my hands around her waist, pressing a kiss to her neck. She stiffened slightly before relaxing against me. It wasn't always like this. I remembered a time when Maddie would have turned around, kissed me back, pulled me into her. A time when my touch would have set her on fire. Now it was just obligation. I wondered if she noticed the difference, if she cared. Sarah and I tried to keep our distance after that first kiss. We really did. We avoided being alone together. We kept our conversations short. We pretended like nothing had changed. But the problem with desire is that once you've tasted it, once you've felt it burn through you, it doesn't just go away. It festers. It grows. It waits for the right moment to take over. That moment came 2 weeks later. Maddie and the kids had gone to visit her parents for the weekend, leaving me with the house to myself. Sarah showed up at my door. She didn't say a word when I opened it. She just looked at me, her eyes dark with something dangerous. I should have told her to leave. I should have slammed the door shut. Instead, I stepped aside and let her in. The moment the door clicked shut, she was on me. Her lips crashed against mine, hungry and desperate. I lifted her off the ground, carrying her to the couch, my hands roaming every inch of her body. There was no hesitation, no second guessing, just heat. Raw, unfiltered need. Clothes disappeared in a blur of hands and mouths. She straddled me, her breath shaky, her skin flushed. Tell me you want this, she whispered, her lips inches from mine. I didn't answer. I just pulled her down onto me. And with that, we crossed the line. The next morning, I woke up tangled in Sarah's naked body. Sunlight streamed through the windows, casting golden patterns across her skin. She stirred, blinking up at me with a sleepy smile. Morning, she murmured, stretching like a cat. Reality slammed into me like a freight train. I had done it. I had cheated on my wife. And the worst part? I didn't regret it. I should have felt sick with guilt. I should have been disgusted with myself. But as Sarah pressed a slow, lazy kiss to my chest, all I felt was the craving for more. We spent the rest of the morning wrapped in each other, lost in the thrill of stolen pleasure. By the time she finally left, my sheets smelled like her. My skin carried the memory of her touch, and I knew this wasn't the last time. When Maddie and the kids returned that evening, I played my part perfectly. I kissed her hello. I hugged my children. I sat at the dinner table and listened to stories about their weekend. I was a husband, a father, a man with everything under control. But deep down, I was already someone else. A liar, a cheater, a man who had tasted forbidden fruit and couldn't stop himself from taking another bite. The texts between Sarah and me became more frequent. Sarah, I can still feel you on me. Me, I can't stop thinking about last night. Sarah, then let's do it again. And just like that, the affair was no longer a mistake. It was an addiction. For weeks, Sarah and I existed in a bubble of secrets and stolen moments. Quickies in my car, late-night phone calls. Every time I was with her, I promised myself it was the last time. And every time, I went back for more. But I had no idea that fate was about to throw another temptation in my path. A temptation even more dangerous than Sarah. Because that's when I met Karen. Maddie invited Sarah's family over for dinner one night. Just a casual evening with food and wine. And that's when I saw her. Karen, Sarah's mother. She was nothing like her daughter. Where Sarah was wild and reckless, Karen was poised and graceful. A woman who carried herself with quiet confidence. She was older, but still stunning. The kind of beauty that didn't fade with time. It just became more refined. And when she smiled at me from across the table, something stirred deep in my gut. Something dangerous. Something inevitable. She had no right to look that good. Karen sat across from me at the dinner table, laughing at something Maddie had said. The sound was smooth, rich, like aged whiskey. Her presence was different from Sarah's. There was no reckless flirtation, no obvious teasing. But it was in her eyes, the way they lingered just a second too long when she looked at me. The way her lips curled ever so slightly at the edges when she spoke. She knew, and she wanted me to know. I shifted in my seat, my mind racing. This wasn't just a dinner with family friends anymore. It was something else, something much more dangerous. The moment dinner ended, Maddie and Sarah disappeared into the kitchen to clean up. Karen poured herself another glass of wine, swirling it lazily as she leaned back in her chair. "Your wife's a lucky woman," she said suddenly. I glanced at her. "Oh?" She tilted her head slightly, studying me. "A man like you, handsome, successful, devoted. Not many women get that these days." Something about the way she said it sent a pulse of heat down my spine. I should have laughed it off. I should have changed the subject. Instead, I let the words settle between us, and Karen held my gaze. She took a slow sip of wine, her eyes never leaving mine. God help me, I wanted her. 2 days later, I found myself in her neighborhood. It wasn't planned. At least, that's what I told myself. I had finished a meeting downtown, and somehow, I ended up in front of her house. A coincidence. A mistake. That's what I kept repeating as I stood on her doorstep, debating whether to knock. And then, the door opened. Karen stood there in nothing but a silk robe, loosely tied at the waist. Her bare legs stretched beneath the hem, smooth and toned. The deep V of the robe exposed just enough to make my mouth go dry. Her lips curved into a knowing smile. "I was just about to take a bath," she said, her voice husky. "Care to join me?" I didn't answer. I just stepped inside. The bathroom was filled with steam, the scent of lavender thick in the air. Karen stood by the tub, untying her robe with slow, deliberate movements. The fabric slipped from her shoulders, pooling at her feet. She was breathtaking, a body that had known time but refused to surrender to it. Soft where it mattered, firm where it counted. I swallowed hard. "We shouldn't." She stepped closer, pressing a finger to my lips. "Don't think," she murmured. "Just feel." And then she kissed me. It was nothing like Sarah. Sarah was wild, frantic, desperate for the thrill. Karen was different. She kissed with experience, with control. Her lips moved slowly, savoring the moment, making me dizzy with want. She guided me toward the tub, unbuttoning my shirt with practiced ease. I let her. I let her undress me, let her pull me into the hot water, let her sink onto me with a slow, aching moan that shattered every last shred of my restraint. I gripped her hips, guiding her movements as she rode me, her nails digging into my shoulders. Her breath came in soft gasps, her head falling back as pleasure overtook her. I shouldn't have been there. I shouldn't have let this happen. But the way she moved, the way she whispered my name like a secret, meant only for me. I couldn't stop, didn't want to stop. She clenched around me, her body shuddering as she came apart in my arms. And just like that, I was lost. Completely, hopelessly, lost. We lay tangled in the cooling water, her fingers tracing lazy patterns on my chest. I should go, I murmured, though I made no move to leave. Karen smiled, running a hand down my stomach. You could, or... Her fingers dipped lower, and just like that, we started again. I didn't sleep that night, not because of guilt. God knows I had lost the ability to feel that by now, but because I couldn't stop thinking about her, about the way she tasted, the way she sounded when she came, the way she made me feel. Sarah had been a thrill, a rush of excitement. Karen was something else, something deeper, and that terrified me. Because for the first time since this whole thing started, I wasn't just cheating for the pleasure. I was cheating because I didn't want to stop. I couldn't stop, even if it destroyed me, even if it destroyed them all. Karen had awakened something in me I never knew existed. It wasn't just about the thrill of cheating anymore. It wasn't just sex. With Sarah, it had been reckless and wild, lust without consequence. But Karen made me feel wanted in a way I hadn't felt in years. She knew how to touch me, how to talk to me, how to make me forget everything outside of her bed. And that was the problem. Because I was starting to crave her more than I should. I should have stayed away. After that first time, I should have told myself it was a mistake and never looked back. But 3 days later, I found myself at her door again. This time, there was no hesitation. She let me in without a word, and before I could take a breath, my back was against the wall, her lips on mine, her hands already undoing my belt. We didn't even make it to the bedroom. She dropped to her knees right there in the hallway, her fingers wrapping around me, her mouth hot and wet and perfect. I gritted my teeth, my hands tangling in her hair as she worked me with slow, deliberate strokes, dragging me to the edge and pulling me back just as I was about to lose control. She was playing with me, and God help me, I let her. When I finally spilled into her mouth, she swallowed every drop, her eyes locked onto mine the entire time. I should have felt guilty, but all I wanted was more. Juggling 2 affairs was getting complicated. Sarah was becoming needy, texting me at odd hours, wanting to meet up more often. Karen, on the other hand, played it cool. No demands, no expectations. She let me come to her, knowing that I would. And that made her even more irresistible. Maddie, of course, had no idea. She still kissed me goodbye in the mornings, still curled up against me in bed at night, oblivious to the scent of another woman's perfume lingering on my skin. I told myself I had everything under control. But then Sarah started getting suspicious. It happened on a Thursday evening. Sarah and I had just finished in the back seat of her car. She was still breathless, her body slick with sweat as she rested her head on my shoulder. "I think I love you," she whispered. I froze. Love? That wasn't part of the deal. I forced a chuckle, pressing a kiss to her temple. "You're crazy." She pulled back, pouting. "I mean it. I feel like I've been waiting for someone like you my whole life." I didn't know what to say to that, But before I could come up with something, her eyes narrowed. "What's that?" she asked, reaching for my neck. I stiffened as her fingers brushed against my skin. A faint, red scratch. Karen's nails. I grabbed her wrist, forcing a smile. Must have been from work. Sarah studied me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she smiled. But something about it sent a chill down my spine. That night, I went to Karen's place again. I needed the distraction, the escape. She welcomed me with a knowing smirk, pulling me into the bedroom without a word. This time, she took control. She straddled me, moving slow and deep, her hands pressing against my chest, her lips teasing mine, but never fully giving in. She was testing my patience, making me beg. And I did. I gripped her hips, pushing deeper, losing myself in her completely. She knew exactly what I needed. And that terrified me. Because the more I had her, the more I didn't want to let her go. But something was changing. Something was coming. And I had no idea just how bad it was going to get. The moment I walked into my house, I knew something was wrong. Maddie was sitting on the couch, her arms crossed, her face unreadable. And next to her, Sarah. She didn't smile. She didn't smirk. She just stared at me, her expression eerily calm. My heart pounded in my chest. This was it. She knew. But how much did she know? And more importantly, had she told Maddie? I forced a smile, acting as if I hadn't just spent the last 2 hours tangled up in Karen's sheets. "Hey, babe," I said, my voice steady. "What's going on?" Maddie tilted her head. Sarah stopped by. She said she needed to talk to me about something important. I swallowed hard. I looked at Sarah, silently pleading with her, but she only smiled, cold, calculating. "I just wanted to clear something up," Sarah said, standing up. She walked toward me slowly, her heels clicking against the floor, her eyes never leaving mine. Then, before I could react, she reached up and traced her fingers along my collarbone. "Still covering up those scratches?" she whispered. Maddie's eyes widened. The room fell into a thick, suffocating silence. And then, "Alex," Maddie's voice was low, trembling. "What the hell is she talking about?" I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Sarah smiled, and then she dropped the bomb. "He's been sleeping with me," Sarah said, her voice dripping with venom. "For months." Maddie shot up from the couch. "You're lying." "Am I?" Sarah pulled out her phone, tapping the screen a few times before holding it up. A video played. Me and Sarah, in a hotel room. The date stamped in the corner, 2 weeks ago. Maddie's face crumpled, her hands shook. "You bastard," she whispered. I took a step forward. "Maddie, please, don't touch me," she screamed, stepping back like I was something disgusting. Sarah's smirk widened. But then, something unexpected happened. Maddie turned to her. "And you," she spat. "You were my best friend. You sat at my table. You held my babies. How could you do this to me?" For the first time, Sarah faltered. "Maddie, Get out," Maddie said, her voice eerily calm. Sarah hesitated. "Get out!" Sarah grabbed her purse and stormed out. I was left standing there, my wife's shattered gaze piercing through me. But she had no idea. This was only half of it, because Sarah wasn't the only one. And Karen was going to be a much bigger problem. That night, Maddie locked herself in the bedroom. I paced the living room, trying to figure out my next move. Sarah was out of the picture, but Karen was still in it, and she had no idea what had just happened. I needed to warn her. I grabbed my phone and texted her. "We need to talk." She replied almost instantly. "Come over." I hesitated. Was this smart? Probably not. But at this point, what did I have to lose? When I got to Karen's house, she was waiting at the door, wearing nothing but a silk robe. "I was hoping you'd come," she murmured, pulling me inside. I should have stopped her. I should have told her what happened. But then she dropped the robe. And for a few blissful, reckless hours, I forgot everything. It wasn't until I was lying in bed next to her, my body spent, that I realized I had made the biggest mistake of all. Because Karen's phone was buzzing, and when I glanced at the screen, my stomach dropped. It was Maddie, and Karen was already reaching for it. I stared at Karen's phone screen, my pulse hammering in my ears. Maddie's name flashed in bold letters. This was bad. Karen reached for the phone, her bare body still tangled in the sheets beside me. I had two choices. 1. Let her answer and risk everything unraveling. 2. Stop her and make up an excuse. I chose the second. Before she could pick up, I grabbed her wrist gently. "Not now," I murmured, my lips brushing against her ear. "Stay with me." She hesitated, her fingers hovering over the screen. The phone buzzed again. Karen glanced at me, then at the phone. I could see the wheels turning in her head. She liked feeling in control. She liked knowing she had me wrapped around her finger. So she let it go. The phone stopped ringing. I exhaled, pressing a kiss to her neck. Crisis averted. For now. After Karen fell asleep, I slipped out of bed and grabbed my phone. 5 missed calls from Maddie. 1 text message. "We need to talk." Now shit. I got dressed quickly, my mind racing. Did she find out about Karen? Or was she just furious about Sarah? Either way, I was screwed. I left Karen's house without waking her. I needed to handle this before it got worse. When I got home, Maddie was waiting for me in the living room. The moment I walked in, she threw a glass at the wall. "You son of a bitch!" she screamed. I barely dodged the shards. "Maddie, listen. Listen!" She laughed bitterly. "You think I don't know? You think I'm that stupid?" My stomach clenched. She knew. Not just about Sarah. About Karen, too. I opened my mouth, but she cut me off. "I called her," she hissed, her hands shaking. "I called Karen, Alex." I went cold. "Number." She told me everything. Maddie's voice cracked. "My best friend wasn't enough? You had to sleep with her mother too?" I had no words, no lies, no excuses. Because what could I say? That it was a mistake? That I never meant to hurt her? That I loved her? None of it would matter. Because the truth was, I had destroyed everything. Maddie walked up to me, her eyes filled with tears. "I gave you everything," she whispered. "And this is how you repay me?" I tried to touch her. She slapped me so hard my vision blurred. Then she shoved a bag into my chest. "Get out!" I blinked. "What?" "You heard me," she spat. "Get the hell out of my house." "Our house," I corrected, desperate. She laughed. "Oh no, not anymore. You lost that right when you decided to screw your way through my life." She turned and walked toward the stairs. I felt something inside me crack. "Maddie, please," I begged. "Think about the kids." She stopped. Then she looked over her shoulder, her voice deadly quiet. "I am." And with that, she went upstairs, leaving me standing there, alone, with nothing. I packed a bag and left. I didn't know where to go. Karen wouldn't take me in. She had made that clear when Maddie called her. Sarah? She had blocked my number. In the end, I checked into a cheap motel on the edge of town. The room smelled like cigarette smoke and regret. I sat on the bed, staring at the ceiling. For the first time in my life, I had no one. Not my wife, not my mistress, not even the woman I thought I had under my control. I had played my game, and I had lost. Badly. Weeks passed. Maddie filed for divorce. She got full custody of the kids. She made sure I had nothing. No home, no money, no family. Karen went back to her ex-husband, claiming our fling was just a way to cope with her divorce. Sarah moved to another city, wanting nothing to do with me. I had thought I was in control. I had thought I could have it all. But in the end, I was just a fool. A man who let his own desires burn everything he had to the ground. And the worst part? I had no one to blame but myself. Cheating doesn't just destroy marriages, it destroys lives, it destroys trust. And once that trust is gone, there's no getting it back. I used to believe I had control. Control over my desires, control over the lies I told, control over the women I played. But as I sat alone in that dingy motel room, surrounded by empty beer bottles and the deafening silence of regret, I realized something. I was never in control. My life had spiraled into chaos the moment I let lust dictate my choices. Now, I had nothing left. No family, no home, no love. Just a past that haunted me like a ghost I couldn't outrun. The divorce papers came 2 weeks later. I didn't even fight them. What was the point? Maddie was done with me. She had every right to be. I had destroyed her. I had destroyed us. But there was still one thing left. My kids. I had to try, even if I didn't deserve them. So one rainy evening, I drove to my old house. The lights were on. A shadow moved past the living room window. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again. The door opened. And there she was. Maddie. Her eyes were colder than I had ever seen them. "What do you want, Alex?" I want to see them." She sighed, gripping the edge of the door. "They're asleep." "I can wait." Her jaw tightened. "No, you can't." A lump formed in my throat. "Maddie, please." She stepped outside, closing the door behind her. "You don't get to just show up," she snapped. "You don't get to pretend you care now." "I do care," I said, voice breaking. She laughed bitterly. "You cared when you were screwing my best friend?" I flinched. "When you were screwing her mother?" I swallowed hard. "Maddie." "You had everything, Alex," she said, her voice thick with anger and pain. "A wife who loved you, kids who adored you, and you threw it all away for what?" I had no answer. She shook her head. "I don't want you around them," she said finally. "Not now." Pain stabbed through my chest. "But they're my kids," I choked out. She lifted her chin. They're my kids now." And with that, she turned and went inside, slamming the door in my face. That night, I drove aimlessly. I ended up at a bar, drowning my sorrows in whiskey and regret. I checked my phone. No messages, no calls. Karen had erased me. Sarah had moved on. And Maddie, she had closed the door on me for good. I was a ghost in my own life, an afterthought, a mistake. And the worst part? I had done it to myself. I woke up the next morning in my car, head pounding, mouth dry, a splitting headache reminding me of how far I had fallen. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. Who the hell was I? Not the man Maddie married, not the father my kids needed, not even the lover Karen or Sarah wanted anymore. I had become a man I despised. And for what? A few nights of pleasure? A selfish escape? Was it worth losing everything? Not even close. A month passed. I stayed away, gave Maddie space, gave myself time to think. Then, one day, I wrote her a letter. Not begging, not making excuses, just the truth. I told her I was sorry, that I knew my apologies would never be enough, that I accepted the consequences of my actions. But I wanted one thing. I slid the letter into her mailbox and walked away, not expecting a reply. I had lost my wife, lost my dignity. Maybe I had lost my kids too, but I had to try. Because if there was any way to rebuild what little was left, I had to take it. I never got a response, not a call, not a text, nothing. Weeks turned into months. I learned to live with the silence. It was the price I paid. Because here's the thing about betrayal. You don't get to choose the punishment. You just have to live with it. And so, I did. Alone. With nothing but my regrets to keep me company. What would you have done? If you were Alex, would you have handled things differently? Or do you think he got what he deserved? Drop a comment below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more stories like this. What should the next story be about? Let me know.